Hello and welcome. My name is Pam Allio. I'll be your MC tonight. And wherever you are in the world and in California, in the Bay Area, we're glad you're here with us tonight. So, most of you are from California, but as you look around your Zoom screen, know that we're a global audience coming together to solve the climate crisis. We've got a great discussion coming your way, and there'll be time at the end for your questions. So first, let me say a few words about the host of this meeting, the Climate Reality Project Bay Area chapter. So the Climate Reality Project was founded by former US Vice President Al Gore in 2006, and that was after the Inconvenient Truth movie came in and used the funds for that to start this Climate Reality Project. So the Climate Reality Project recruits, trains, and mobilizes people of all ages and backgrounds to work for just climate solutions that speed the global transition from dirty fossil fuels to clean, renewable energy. Through our 100 plus US chapters and 11 international branches, we have over 3.8 million members and supporters around the world. Together, we drive change to stop rising temperatures and build a sustainable future for all by reducing emissions, calling out greenwashing, financing a just transition, and promoting international cooperation. I'm proud to say that our Bay Area chapter is the largest in the world, with over 2,000 active members and supporters. Every year, we put on dozen events such as this, both virtual and in person. And in fact, one of our speakers was at our event in San Francisco at the San Francisco Climate Week, which we intend to do more of those in-person events in the coming months ahead. Okay, so it's almost time to introduce our speakers, but before we begin, we'd like to offer a land acknowledgement, which is our custom and climate reality. So it's a traditional custom in many Native communities and nations to show respect to the ancestors and the land itself. For me and many non-Indigenous individuals and communities, it's important to recognize the relationship to the original communities, and the inhabitants to this land. It's a way to show respect and gratitude to the traditional stewards of these lands, while recognizing that colonialism is still a thing. It's still an ongoing process. With that in mind, I invite you to reflect on where you are now. For instance, I'm in Danville on Bay Miwok tribal lands. And consistent with the values of community and inclusion, we have a responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and make visible our relationship to Native peoples. Thank you. Now on to our presentation for today, Reimagining the Future, Doughnut Economics for a Truly Sustainable Economy. Our guests tonight are part of the California Doughnut Economic Coalition with a mission to initiate regenerative and distributive economic systems throughout California using 21st century doughnut economics thinking. Franziska Raedeker is an independent sustainability consultant and lecturer. She helps organizations worldwide reduce their footprint and develop regenerative strategies with a positive impact on people, planet, and prosperity. Franziska is a trained climate reality since 2021 with the Climate Reality Project. Della Duncan is the presentation lead at CalDEC, which I mentioned, the California Doughnut Economic Coalition. Della is a renegade economist who hosts the Upstream podcast, inviting you to unlearn everything you thought you knew about economics. Welcome, Della and Franziska, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Pam, and thank you to all of you. Thanks for joining us. I want to start with a quote. We are attentive to what we measure. We are attentive to what we measure. This is a quote from a mentor of mine, Dr. Ha-Vin To, who's the former program director of the Gross National Happiness Center. And I weave it in the beginning to just presence, what is it that we are measuring? What is it that we measure as individuals? What is a good day? What is a good life? What is good work? What is it we measure in our communities? What is a good community? What is progress? What is development? And what is it we measure systemically? What are we attentive to? So I just want to start with that quote. We are attentive to what we measure, and weave that in as we discuss what is a truly sustainable economy. And so we are so grateful to be with you this evening. Again, I'm Della, a Lonely Land, and I am the presentation lead at the California Doughnut Economics Coalition. And I'm happy to welcome and introduce Franziska, my co-lead.
Thank you, Della, and thanks to Pam and the Climate Reality Bay Area chapter, for having us tonight. As Pam mentioned, I got certified as a climate reality leader back in spring 2021. I was still all virtual, and since then have helped the California Doughnut Economics Coalition first get established and then define where we want to go. And now that we have something that we can share, we are very excited to bring that to groups, both civic groups such as Climate Reality, but also to universities and businesses and other places where economics are still oftentimes being taught in a very narrow way. And there are a lot of beautiful new ways to look at that. And before we jump into Della explaining a bit more about doughnut economics, I just want to show you the overview of what our presentation would look like. Della, if you could go to the outline, please. Thank you. And you'll notice that there's a little green ring, and it's not just a symbol of climate reality leaders, but also plays a very key role at Doughnut Economics, because this will be where we want to be. More on that from Della. So she'll give an intro to Doughnut Economics. I will talk a bit about what we have found in terms of California. Then Della will show some examples and discuss how to bring Doughnut Economics to life. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion with you. Looking forward to that.
Thank you. So to begin, what is doughnut economics? And yes, we are sorry that we can't be sharing donuts together this evening. Virtually, we are. I want to just present and share Kate Raworth here. Kate Raworth is the lead person of Doughnut Economics, so appreciating her. And she is someone who calls herself a renegade economist, and I actually aspire to be a renegade economist like Kate Raworth. That's where I came with the term. This over here is a book by Kate Raworth that we highly recommend, a very good primer on what is doughnut economics. The title is Doughnut Economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. And if this presentation interests you, it might be a book that you will want to check out and perhaps read with a group. And lastly, want to just show that Doughnut Economics is part of a global community. It's not just Kate Raworth, it's not just Franziska and myself, but it is a global community. So DEAL is the Doughnut Economics Action Lab. So what is doughnut economics? It's a few things. It is a holistic goal for an economy based on the well-being of people and nature. So it's really an alternative goal of an economy. And it really centers not just meeting of human needs, but also the well-being or the happiness or the health of nature as well. But it isn't just that, it's also a measurement tool. So as I mentioned, we are attentive to what we measure. And so right now on the individual, the collective, the systemic level, we typically measure things like growth of income, growth of wealth, growth of GDP, gross domestic product. And that's not really a holistic measurement tool. It's not really taking into the health and well-being of people and also the more than human world, our ecological systems. And so doughnut economics is an alternative measurement tool guiding us towards this holistic goal of an economy based on the well-being of people and nature. It's also a policy screening tool, and I know policy is a key component of climate reality work. And so it's a way to say, how does this policy affect the meeting of the human needs in an economy, but also staying within consideration of the needs of the ecosystem of that economy? So it's a policy screening tool as well. It's also a business framework. So there is a tool and a whole area of work within doughnut economics to say businesses can actually support us in getting within the doughnut, in having us meet the human needs within an economy, but also stay within considerations of the needs of the more than human world or of nature. And finally, as I mentioned, it is a global community. So it is all around the world, and it is really alive and changing week to week as communities around the world bring doughnut economics to life wherever they are. So this is what is doughnut economics. What is the donut? So this word, the donut, what does that mean? So this right here is the shape of the donut. So the donut is a compass to guide us towards ecologically safe and socially just economies in which humans and the rest of nature can thrive in balance. So this is the donut here, and it has a couple components to it. One is the donut hole. We can imagine the donut hole here, which are the human needs. So the meeting of human needs within an economy. And these 12 areas measuring the human well-being or the meeting of the human needs come from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we can take this economy, this measurement tool, at many different scales. So we could take this for the Bay Area, we could take this for California, we could take this for the United States, or we could take this for the whole world, the whole planet. And we can ask ourselves and do the research to figure out how well are each of these needs being met. If these needs are not being met, we are in shortfall. If these needs are all being met, then we will have met the social foundation. However, it's not enough just to think of our economies as meeting the human needs. We must also think in consideration of the more than human world, of our natural systems, of our ecosystems, our bioregions. So the other component of the donut is the ecological ceiling, which consists of the 9 planetary boundaries beyond which lies unacceptable environmental damage. So that is the outer ring of the donut, the outer ring of the donut. These are the 9 planetary boundaries. They come from the Stockholm Resilience Center, and we can think of them as our planet can sustain some pressure or changes in these areas, but if they go beyond certain tipping points, it is really unacceptable environmental damage to our systems. And so again, we can measure this on multiple scales, locally, nationally, globally. And where we are over, right, in terms of chemical pollution or ozone layer depletion or air pollution, we are in overshoot. Okay, so the idea is that the alternative goal, the holistic goal of the economy of the donut, is to get us within the donut. And you can imagine some sprinkles here on the donut. The getting us within the donut means that our economy would be in the safe and just space for humanity. That is the donut. So hopefully this gives you an intro into what is the donut and what does it mean to have an alternative goal, and also a little indication as to what some of the alternative indicators or measurements that we're looking towards. So as you all know, being folks deeply invested in climate and what's happening in the world, you likely can recognize that we are living in a world out of balance. So this here is our global donut, offered by Kate Rayworth and Andrew Fanning, and it shows how far we are in shortfall, that there are so many people on our planet who are not adequately having their needs met in many areas, in many ways. And as you well know, there are so many areas that we are in overshoot, that we are going beyond the carrying capacity of our ecological systems. So we are currently in a world out of balance. And this may be hard to receive, but it really gives us a temperature check or a holistic health report of where we are and then where we need to go and where we need to be. One thing that the Doughnut economics model does is it really reframes development, right? This is a really interesting graph that shows that if we have on this side the social thresholds achieved, so the meeting of human needs, these would be the countries that are meeting human needs. These are the countries that are staying within the ecological boundaries, but this is where we need to be, where we are meeting the human needs, but we're staying within the ecological boundaries. So as you can see, there's no countries that are really in this space. So what Kate Rayworth would say is there is no developed country. There is no developed country when we think about it in terms of the donut. There's no place where we are meeting the human needs. We're in low overshoot, but we're in high threshold of social achieved, but we're also in low overshoot. So this also says where we need to be globally. So just an introduction to who we are, Franziska and myself. We are part of a team. We're part of the California Doughnut Economics Coalition. We actually started by getting together on that Doughnut Economics Action Lab as activists, change makers, community organizers, researchers, folks interested in bringing doughnut economics to life in California. We had a series of meetings and exploring the donut in California. And then we created a 501c3 in 2023. And we really wanted to embody the doughnut economics, regenerative and cooperative economics within our model. So we are actually a worker self-directed nonprofit, which means we utilize horizontal governance and sociocratic decision making. Our vision is to create a California where people and planet thrive together, and our strategy is fourfold. One is to create a new economic narrative for California, right? That getting us within the donut, meeting the human needs while staying within the needs of our ecosystems, collaborating with existing change makers like you all, like Climate Reality Bay Area, sparking donut initiatives and policies at multiple levels, whether that's bioregions, cities, counties, statewide, and even connecting with other initiatives in other states and other areas, and creating and developing our Doughnut Snapshot of California, which Franziska will speak to in a moment. So now I'm going to hand over to Franziska to introduce that work, the creation of the California Doughnut Snapshot. Over to you, Franziska.
Thank you. Yeah, we thought that after seeing Kate Raworth and all these people globally doing donut research and measuring and applications worldwide, we thought, well, California is the fifth, or in the meantime, even fourth largest economy in the world. What would it look like for us here? Where are the places where we are most out of balance, and therefore hopefully policy should focus on? And given that all these different metrics are very interrelated, we thought we really want to look at both the social foundation and the planetary boundaries, the ecological ceiling. Della, could you show the next slide, please? Thank you. The platform from the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, and I put the link in the chat, actually really has so many interesting ways that people worldwide have applied it, because there's no one way to do the donut. There are so many local ideas that have been brought to bear there. So for example, there are a couple of city donuts that have been developed, like in Amsterdam or in Melbourne. There are there are bioregion or country level donuts, for example, in Scotland and then Brazil and some other places. The one that I wanted to highlight is the one here, what Della's pointer is just on. It's from New Zealand, and they brought in their own Maori traditions by actually reversing the inside and the outside of the donut, because that reflects how they have been traditionally thinking about the world, and they came up with ways there. And all these dots on the map actually are locations in the world where people have been using the donut to first find out how out of balance they are, and then how to make things better. So we rolled up our sleeves and developed first a California Doughnut Snapshot, which was just released the end of last year. Our team of about 10 or 12 people was really involved deeply in doing the research, discussing how we should best measure each of those dimensions, because there's a myriad of ways of slicing and dicing it, and also thinking about what do we want to do with it. Can you go to the next one, please? Our goals with the California Doughnut Snapshot are that we want to measure current ecological and social shortfall or overshoot, and we want to reframe what is the economy here for, how can that better align with those social and ecological goals. We also want to inspire the wider adoption of that framework so that maybe others can get inspired by that. Also within California, local bioregional groups aligning with partners. So we're really inviting a lot of people to collaborate, and a little bit more on that later, but we'd also love to collaborate more with the Climate Reality Project. ideas for collaboration are out there, and anything that sparks ideas, let us know. How do we go about finding the right data out there, given that we're all not academics, or at least maybe a long time ago, but we did want to make sure we got the right ones. What is most relevant for California? Because each location probably has a different way of looking at things. We considered about 200 different social and environmental indicators. We chose 24 for the social, 18 for the ecological, and if you remember some of the math, it's 2 for each of those categories. And then we created out of that one California Doughnut. And the data, to make sure it's really solid, was reviewed by researchers. We have about 50% of our data coming from government agencies. Thank goodness we were able to do that before the current onslaught on research everywhere. We were able to find about 30% from NGOs out there, and 20 are from purely academic papers. This, take a deep breath, this is the California Doughnut. It's a lot to take in. You'll first notice, again, it's a typical picture. Outside the ecological ceiling, inside the social foundation, between that, the beautiful donut, the safe and just space where California should hopefully be. You'll notice there's a lot of red on the outside. Essentially, the only place where it's tolerable is ozone depletion. And we'll get more into some of the details everywhere. Climate change, which I know is near and dear to your hearts, is one of the big categories there. So we'll have a closer look at that soon. On the social foundation, we'll also see that despite all this richness that exists in California and so many people working in high-tech sectors and other efforts, we're still not doing right by people's needs in so many different ways. Could you click once, please? In summary, really, we're falling short on 100% of the social indicators and almost 90% of the environmental ones. Our best performing social category is on water and sanitation, and on peace and justice, we're really not doing great here in California. Ozone depletion is our best category, again, worldwide, since the Montreal Protocol and Kigali Agreement that has improved worldwide, and thank goodness that is better. But climate change is actually our worst category here in California. And we're falling a little bit short, or quite a bit short, on some social indicators, but it's only about 33% or 34%. But the ecological overshoot is humongous. Let that sink in for a moment, and we will take a closer look at what actually is driving this. First, we're going to have a look at the social foundation. If we zoom into that donut hole, you can see that each of the categories listed on the side have 2 indicators, as I said. So we found, for example, for energy, we decided to look at energy burden and energy reliability. For income and work, for example, we looked at poverty and unemployment. And each of these then has more data behind it. So imagine you kind of snipped open this ring at any point and unrolled it. Then you would get a more detailed picture. Della, could you move on? Thank you. That is the social foundation in more detail. You'll notice again the 12 categories, and you'll also see a very precise description of the indicators we selected. We tried to make sure that we're having always a perspective of both global and California local to each of those. So for example, if you look at those that have the biggest shortfall, I would point here to social cohesion, the income inequality, and we know that hasn't gotten better since the data that we were able to collect in 24. And also peace and justice, violent crime is not doing great. On the better end of things, water and sanitation, as we mentioned, are in relatively good shape. However, this is maybe the point where I can explain something that we did a bit differently than, let's say, Kate Rayworth on the global donut. Globally, some groups that have been researching country donuts or worldwide donuts have used threshold values that they deemed acceptable shortfalls or overshoot. And each of those actually is a very deep running decision. You have to figure out, what do you think is an acceptable level of having bad water, or how much housing burden is what you want to aim for. And so we decided in a lot of our threshold levels to become even more aspirational than the worldwide or country level donuts did. And so that means that we show more shortfall or overshoot on a lot of those categories than maybe if you had gotten a more lenient interpretation of that. But we do think we want to be in a world where no Californian is lacking access to drinking water, for example. So maybe one example is on the next page, Della. Yeah, for housing, for example, homelessness and housing burden were the two indicators that we decided to use. For homelessness, we picked the point-in-time count of unhoused people that California does on an annual basis. And with that, you see there were about 181,000 people unhoused at that point. That I believe includes both the sheltered and unsheltered population. And that's about, I think, a fourth, 25 to 30% actually of the nation's unhoused population. Desirable, our aspirational level would be 0%. Nobody should be without a safe roof over their heads. So that means we had a shortfall of about 35%, because that's the population of unhoused people to the total residents in California at that time. Housing burden, similarly, just to show an example, we decided to use the percentage of renters who had housing costs of more than 30% of their income, i.e. not enough was left for other things that they need to spend on. And there the shortfall was 55%, because again, we said desirable would be to have 0. On all of those indicators, I can give you a little heads up or a preview. We are in the process of developing an in-depth report for each of those, which is about 2 to 3 pages each. And those in-depth reports will be coming out later this summer, hopefully end of June. So do stay tuned for that. Similarly, let's have a look at the ecological ceiling of those 9 planetary boundaries. Again, 2 indicators per category. And on all of those, we're quite overshooting a lot. Again, the only one that works reasonably well still is ozone depletion. Some others are a little bit less over the tolerable limits, but those are biophysical boundaries, so there's no big negotiating out around that. The more tricky thing for us in that case was, how do you break down the, let's say, the pollution of the atmosphere or the oceans to what is right for California? Let's unroll this ring as well. So here we have those 9 categories with 2 indicators each. And here you really have to look at the numbers, because there's a lot that got shortened to fit on the page. Greenhouse gas emissions are a huge overshoot. And that is actually, I believe, 2016 or 18 data, and we now have more current data that shows an even larger overshoot. That's more in the category of 1,800% overshoot. So boy, oh boy, California is using way more than its share there and producing more pollution that way. Similarly, also in the thousands, you can see the at-risk species and biodiversity loss. Again, none of those indicators can be really seen totally isolated. You know probably how interlinked this poly crisis is and how much each of those tipping points might drag other things down with it. Again, let's pick one indicator to have a closer look. And I thought you would probably want to see climate change. given that it's climate reality here with us. Here we had the greenhouse gas emissions, and we calculated the greenhouse gas footprint per capita on a consumption basis. They're usually the production and the consumption side things. Production would only count things that are being made in California, but we want to know kind of what's our impact on the entire world. What is California's consumption producing in terms of greenhouse gases? And there we had, like I said, an over 1,000, maybe closer to 2,000% overshoot. Renewable electricity is the other indicator we picked. And again, there were a plethora to choose from. It was really hard to narrow it down. But we said it's really important that we have more renewable energy there. And electricity is the place that we can measure it best. Here we know that California is generating about 38% of its electricity from renewables. And we were very limited and strict on solar, wind, and geothermal. We decided not to use some others that are a little bit more controversial. We wanted to have what would be in the best world the right percentage, and we said 100% solar, wind, and geothermal, and therefore we're lacking 62%. So that's kind of the overview of those indicators, and you get a little flavor of what's happening there. I now want to bring you back to the big picture, the California Doughnut Snapshot. Think about that for a moment, and I'll invite Della to come back in and help us guide through what that means for us.
Yeah, thank you. And I will also add that all of those details that Franziska showed but didn't go into are in that report. So if you do want to dive in deeper, there's a lot there. So
let me quickly add, I will both put the link in the chat as well as at the end we will have QR codes for downloading the report. Thank you.
Yeah. So here we have our California donut. So just taking a minute again, a breath to feel into this, into what Franziska shared, into the red, right, into the shortfall, the overshoot. And our reflective questions for us are, how does this feel, right, to receive this? And then where are we? Where are we as a community? Where is climate realities work? Where is each of yours work, right? Where are you feeling called at this time? And also, how do we get within the safe and just space for humanity, knowing where we are, knowing what the snapshot is telling us? So now I want to talk about how we might bring doughnut economics to life and how we as a California Doughnut Economics Coalition are supporting folks to bring doughnut economics to life. So how to bring doughnut economics into life or into practice. On the individual level, some things that we can all do is unlearn what we've been taught about 21st century economics. We really love to challenge and interrogate mainstream economic thinking, things like infinite growth is possible on a finite planet, things like we as humans are homo economicus, right? Rational, self-interested beings out for our own self-interest. There's these things that have been taught to us and are continuously being taught in mainstream economics, and doughnut economics and this work that we're doing is really inviting us to unlearn those ways and to learn more regenerative and cooperative ways, things like systems thinking or indigenous economics or ecological economics. Another invitation for us as individuals is to embody post-growth living. This goes back to that quote that I shared at the top. We're attentive to what we measure. That on the collective level, we can look at our economies and ask, how are we measuring success? But even on our individual level, we can contemplate what is enoughness for each of us? What does it mean to live a good life? How are we measuring what is a good life for us? And how might we bring in more holistic measurement tools and think not just about our ecological footprints, but our ecological handprints, right? The ways that we contribute to this time. So how might we each embody post-growth living in our own ways, in our own lives, and in our work? Together, our general ways that we can bring doughnut economics into practice, some general invitations. One is to study doughnut economics together. As I mentioned, this book, by Kate Raworth, is a great book to read together. So if you haven't yet read it, maybe bring together a few friends and read a chapter a week, but it's a really beautiful thing to study together. And the Doughnut Economics Action Lab also has a series of papers and tools and videos and fun ways to also study doughnut economics together. And then also in general, to bring doughnut economics into local policies, businesses, civic institutions, nonprofits, and schools. Again, the Doughnut Economics Action Lab has all these ways that we can weave in doughnut economics principles, tools, and practices into whichever organizations and institutions we're a part of. And then some invitations for climate reality, both, more generally, and then also your Bay Area chapter. One is to unite us under a common goal, right? To see climate realities work and also doughnut economics as related to a common goal. And not just us, but to see us as part of a movement, part of a coalition of actors who are really trying to say, how do we get us within the doughnut? Right? How do we meet the human needs, but also stay within the needs of the planet? And how do we see the work that you all are doing as central and very related to the work of doughnut economics? Secondly, how to create doughnut snapshots in climate reality communities and chapters. So perhaps creating a snapshot of the Bay Area. Or if there's groups of you that work together in different cities or bioregions or communities, how might you do this measurement for where you are and really bring this measurement tool to life to really illustrate how are you doing and then where do you need to go? And then finally, as I know that the policy work is also central to climate reality, how might you bring doughnut economics policy screening tools, this idea of how does a policy at the local, national, or international level impact the doughnut, right, and impact doughnut economics? And so I know you all have policy action teams. So how might you weave in doughnut economics into that work? So these are some invitations for how we all might weave or bring to life doughnut economics into practice. One thing that Franziska and I wanted to share was that we are supporting, after this California snapshot, local communities in bringing the doughnut economics to life. So we have many pathways of localization. Two of them that we are really exploring this year. And I know somebody, at least one person in the chat is zooming in from San Diego, so I was happy to see that. So we have two pilot sites. One is San Diego, one is San Jose. And they actually look very different. San Diego was a group of academics and community leaders, business leaders who said they wanted to bring doughnut economics to life. In San Jose, it's a climate activist, a mom, and just very connected with the local communities. And so in both places, they're bringing doughnut economics to life. We're supporting them as an org. Doing different measurement tools and indicators and also sharing resources and information. So this is meant to inspire. Again, if you have a place in mind where you think that bringing doughnut economics would be really supportive to the work that you all are doing. One other element of the pathways to localization, which Franziska alluded to, is it's not enough to think about how our economies are impacting the local. We also must think about the global. So in this pathways to localization, we ask a couple of questions. One is, how can blank, whatever place you are, say the Bay Area, how can the Bay Area support the vitality of the ecosystems we live in? And how can all the people of the Bay Area thrive? But it's not enough to just think of that local level and to stop there. We also have to think to our global responsibilities. So we also ask, how can the Bay Area respect the health of the whole planet? And how can the Bay Area respect the well-being of all people? So just want to give some wider systemic consideration to the doughnut, especially as you might think of how you might bring doughnut economics to life wherever you are. So how do we get our economies within the doughnut? I know this is a very common question and perhaps something we'll explore in the Q&A. So we just wanted to name it, to voice it, to kind of say that we can anticipate that it's coming. The one part of the doughnut that maybe I didn't share was this part right here, the regenerative and distributive economy. So the idea is that once you have this snapshot of how is an economy doing at the meeting of the human needs, how is it doing in relation to the ecological needs, you can see how far we are from the safe and just space for humanity. The work then is together, we, create the regenerative and distributive economy to get us there. And that's a whole other body of work and a whole compilation of tools and activities. Again, many of which are in the Doughnut Economics Action Lab and also in that book, Doughnut Economics. But just to name that, if you are wondering that how, it's certainly something we can go more deep into, but this is really the how of getting us within the donut. I just want to name that. So we have some invitations going forward, and then we want to turn to the Q&A. So we are so excited to hear what's coming up for you. What are you wondering? What are you thinking? What's resonating? What's connecting with your all's work? Before we do, we just want to share the snapshot report that Franziska alluded to. There's the QR code there, and we'll be sharing these slides after the meeting as well. But you can go ahead and snap that if you'd like to dive deeper into the data. Connect with us at info@caldec.org, whether that's partnering, whether that's other presentations, whether that's volunteering. The Doughnut Economics tools for cities and regions. Again, if there's anyone who's like really interested in bringing Doughnut Economics to life where you are, doughnuteconomics.org. And then finally, we are offering this volunteer, and we're a volunteer org. And so if anyone feels inspired to support us financially, here is our QR code for donations. So these are our invitations going forward. And we're going to close with our questions and discussion. So our questions for you, and then I'll stop sharing the screen and we can see who would like to share and what's coming in, what's resonating for folks, is how would you apply Doughnut Economics? So what is coming up for you in your life? Maybe there's something that resonated or something you want to try to weave in. Maybe something in your work more generally, and particularly in your climate reality communities. What is resonating in terms of climate reality? How can we see ourselves as partners in this collective effort to get within the donut? So just want to present those questions and just create some time and space for any questions or general thoughts or feelings.
Thank you so much, Della and Franziska. We'd like to open it up for questions. And I think, if we could address Jane Franch's comment about, and I thought of the same thing, where you did solar and wind and geothermal as the energy that you were looking at. So why not look at hydro or nuclear? What was your thinking behind that? Because when you do add in those others, which are do not produce emissions.
Right. And I probably, for details of that, I might have to even go back to our research team who was diving into that. But I know that we decided that to include the gold standard of solar, wind, and geothermal. If we had included hydropower, biomass, and nuclear, our overshoot would obviously be a bit lower. But then also, we're also looking at just electricity generation versus all energy usage, and that would also drive the overshoot higher. So it's a compromise there. I believe the reason for not counting the other types of non-directly fossil energies are that they tend to come with some downsides and more invasiveness in ecosystems. But again, I would have to check with our researchers why the line was drawn there.
And I'll add that we thought of these different indicators, but then we did bring them to academics and nonprofits and other organizations to really get their feedback. And so this is also the more collective, weighing in. And a lot of the donuts have a lot of diversity. So if anyone was interested in bringing this to a local community, you can have that discussion as to which data points you would want to bring into the donut.
Right. And if you all would like to raise your hand if you have a question or thinking about how you'd work it into your community. I know my Contra Costa County, we have oil refineries in our backyard. So I see Waitai on the call. We just dealt with another refinery fire in Benicia. So all of that is going on. So there's a lot to consider in the different areas. I agree. Anybody have any questions or comments for Della and Franziska?
I think. Sorry. Should we raise our hands or just speak up?
Yeah. Raise your hand. Yeah, please. So we'll start with Joe.
Well, thank you. I had several questions. First, a comment. The idea of the measurements is, I think, absolutely right on, and it seems to me that would be really powerful to build cell phone app that takes the data from the measurements and feeds them to the cell phone, to the app, and highlights, changing situations that are getting better or worse or whatever. Because the more people who are aware of what's happening, the more likely we're going to get forced action, action brought by the public. And I think that would maybe a wonderful way to get as much public interest as possible, or at least to dramatically increase the public interest. Second question I had is, how do I connect with the San Diego group? And the third is anybody using these measurements to impact city policy? Going to, participating in city council meetings and events, using the measurements to say, we're not pulling it off here, there, or wherever. Here's areas that need change, and let's figure out some local policies to cause that change. Is that an active part of what's happening, and how could we build on that?
Great questions, and maybe I can take a stab at some of that, and then Della can add to it. So the easy one out the ballpark. First, we will connect you with people in San Diego. The other one is regarding how to bring that into city policy making. Some of the local groups in San Jose and other places where we've had eco festivals or been participating have had interest in bringing some of that to their local level. At some point, it gets really difficult to break down, let's say, ocean acidification measurement to a city level. That is not as productive, because you not only want to put your finger on the wound, you really want to help kind of heal. And therefore, I think this kind of green four lenses perspective that Della brought in, and a number of the other city and regional tools, can help a lot more for developing that. We were actually trying to bring this not only city by city, let lots of little donuts bloom kind of a way out there, but also at the California state level to really bring that into state decision making and measuring. Like Della said, for example, Bhutan has this gross national happiness indicator. Vermont was looking at some genuine progress indicator for a couple of years. We are hoping to maybe do something like that California can not only say we're the fourth largest economy by GDP, but also we've been improving on these and those ecological metrics and on these and those social metrics as well. So to actually have that be in service to people and planet. And Della, jump in, and I'll come back with the last point.
Yeah, so I put Stacy's information in the chat for the San Diego connection. And then in San Jose, we are trying to bring in a more participatory form of data collection. So one of the things that we're doing is a survey. So just to your point, Joe, about bringing the public in, we're having a survey to collect data, and also trying to weave in story, right? So that people's stories can kind of bring the data to life. And one donut that's really doing this well is the Melbourne donut. They have their image of the donut, and you can click on it, and it goes to a real life story of someone. So there's actually a lot there around how do we bring the data to life? How do we bring in the public? How do we make this more a participatory experience? So I really hear you, Joe, on that. And then another thing to add around the city policy piece, as Franziska mentioned, the donut has come about in different places in different ways. So, for example, in Amsterdam, it really was more like, we could say top down, it's from the city. And then in other places, like in San Jose, it's more like the grassroots climate group that started it. But certainly presenting to city council members is something we've done, and something that we continue to do, because it really does, the donut really feels like it cuts through bipartisan politics the framing of the donut and also the data part of the donut is a really like something that can really unify people and really like just shift the whole narrative. So I find that at local levels and policymakers and folks in city councils are really drawn to the donut. So yes, I'd say both in San Diego and in San Jose, and as Franziska mentioned at the state level where we're working, we're finding that people are interested in bringing the donut into government at all levels.
Yeah, and one last point around the app idea that you suggested, Joe. I think it would be great to have that kind of broadly, openly sourced data available. And unfortunately, not all the areas have such a great availability of data for local levels, such as, or especially real time, such as Climate Trace now with Al Gore. That partnership is great for getting the climate data. Super great. If you want to start some project around that, including trying to find funding to get more real-time data out there to see how the California Doughnut evolves over time, would be wonderful. Right now, we just had to do what we could do with the resources available and also the data available. And sometimes the data was as recent as 2023. Sometimes it was from 5 years ago. We kind of tried to keep it as recent as possible. But again, it would be great to have it real time. But then again, as long as it moves action in the right direction, I think it is helpful. And we can redo it periodically if need be.
Yeah, and great. And Joe, I don't know if you're involved with the Climate Reality chapter in San Diego, but it is very active. So you could reach out. I put the link in the chat too if you want to join. You don't have to be a trained leader to join that chapter down there. Let's go on to Manjari. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. You want to take yourself off mute?
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you. Great presentation. I think I have a question on what are the actionable, what are the actions we can do to be within the donut, right? And can we live within the donut without changing our lifestyle to some extent?
Yeah, I can start, Franziska, and then you can chime in. So, excellent question. And, when I look at the donut and I see the social indicators and the ecological, one thing that I do is I say, who is doing this work, right? What organizations and people are working on housing or water or food? And it really uplifts that work and those people, and can really reprioritize. Like, this can actually help with budget allocation, right? And where do we want to guide our energy towards? So supporting those organizations and people who are doing that work to get us within the donut at all these different levels. And for each of us to ask, where is it that we want to contribute? So perhaps we are called to different areas of the donut to get us within the donut, right? And so that's another element of it. And then, do we change our lifestyle? One interesting conversation around this is, I mentioned that one of the invitations at the individual level is to embody post-growth living. And that word post-growth is a whole movement, and Doughnut Economics is a part of this movement. And folks on the call may be familiar also with degrowth. And what Kate Rayworth would say is that she is growth agnostic. Growth agnostic, meaning let growth not be the end goal, but be a means to an end. And this goes back to that slide that I showed about how there's no country that is meeting all the human needs and staying within the ecological boundaries. So there may be places where an economy needs to grow, and industries and in ways that it needs to grow. And there's other ways that it needs to degrow. And so what I will say is, if you're curious about degrowth, Dr. Jason Hickel, his book, Less is More, How Degrowth Will Save the World, is a beautiful book on what actually is degrowth and how it impacts us as individuals and communities. And what it really shows, to that point, less is more, is that it's not a detriment. It's things like abolishing planned obsolescence, encouraging the right to repair, our utensils and washing machines, 4-day work week, right? So it's like a win-win for us and for communities. So would we change our ways of living to get within the donut? I would say yes, likely, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be a detriment, if that makes sense. So that's how I would respond. But Franziska, anything you'd add?
I would just emphasize that it doesn't have to mean that you renounce unless you're one of the top 0.1% that has multiple private jet flights a year or something like that. It really is not a lifestyle of constriction. It's really trying to make sure that everybody gets lifted up above the social foundation, and that we are bringing our use of the planet back into the boundaries of what it can renew and stomach. And I think, really after a certain level of sufficiency, there are so many non-material things that are more important in life that, especially for the global north and the richer parts of society, that is definitely a different level of living. The people who are in the global south and in the more unequal parts of our society, definitely there is some way that they still need to increase income, spending, education, all of that to get into the donut.
Thank you. Wei Tai.
Okay, thank you so much for starting your California Doughnut chapter. I read the book back in 2020, and as a person who studied economics and political science in college, this topic has been of interest to me for a long time. Like, what is the perfect society? How should governments and what are good economics? A socialist, capitalist? There's so many different models. And how do you get to a good society? So I think Kate Raworth did a great job. And one of the things that to me stuck most was the topic you just discussed on growth. Because I'd say, at least in America, whether you're a Democrat or Republican president, every single president has said growth is good. We want the economy to grow. We want to grow. We want to grow. And I think her message in the book is that, there's a point, a tree doesn't just grow forever. A child doesn't grow forever, right? So it's not really, we take this mantra of growth is good as if it was a truth. And I do think that we all, if you own real estate, you want your investment to grow. You own a stock, you want it to grow, right? And so there's a lot cultural or economically or politically that's embedded in human behavior here. And I thought one of the biggest messages she was making was that we need a cultural shift, not just a tactical shift of, hey, let's work on these metrics and let's try to improve our climate and energy. But it really was a shift in thinking that, growth is good. Maybe that statement is not really something we should worship. And so I just wonder, your California coalition and all the coalitions around the world that are pressing donut economics, how much do you think you can make cultural shift, or do you think, like, let's not go after that, let's just do more of the tactical elements?
Well, I don't know, I can't speak for the other donut economics groups worldwide, but I would definitely say what really attracted Della, me, and the people in our California group to doughnut economics is that it really, on a systems thinking scale, is not at the very small tactical changes. It really realizes that the biggest lever you have, if you know Donella Meadows' systems change theory, that is really changing the goal of a system and changing the mindsets behind that. So we really want to have this really long and big lever, and economics and economic systems are, as so many other things, man-made man-made mostly. Even women had different perspectives on that. And it ignores, for example, the care economy, the sharing economy, and a lot of other things that should be taken into consideration. And we can change it again. It does require a longer breath on that. And given the pressing issues on climate and democracy and everything else in our world, it can seem like a long game, but so we're also doing the smaller things at the same time. But I think the really big idea is behind the system change idea and the changing the goal of a system. And Wei-Tai, if you've read the book, it's probably very present to you, but for those who haven't really looked at it, the kind of growth addiction that our economy seem to have is really because the theory was that growth will lift it up again, even out the tide, everything lifts all boats, and we can clean it up later when we're rich enough. That has been proven wrong over and over again. And that's why we think we need to start with a different kind of goal for the economy and really see, does it make people happy, and is it regenerative to the planet? Della?
Yeah, no, I really love that question. I would say we absolutely are working on a cultural shift as well as policy and, economic shift. And one of the most heartening things that I've come to know from unlearning mainstream economic thinking is this idea of enoughness, that humans can come to a place of enoughness. And Daniel Kahneman is one of those folks who did this research that showed that happiness and income are correlated until a certain amount, and then it essentially plateaus. And that this is widely felt or experienced. And just knowing that we can have enoughness, that we can reach enoughness, sufficiency, contentedness, and it's something we can practice. Right? That's why practicing gratitude or enoughness in our current economic system is actually a quite radical act. And that's why this idea of we are attentive to what we measure. It's like, if we're measuring the money in the bank and that's the only thing that matters to me and I want to keep amassing that, then that's what I'm attentive to. But if I'm considering other qualitative factors in my life, then that's what I measure, right? And so on all levels, we can think about, yes, people who do not have enough, who are precarious or do not have their basic needs met, more money does equal more happiness. But then at a certain point, we can reach enoughness. And that cultural shift is really what I meant by we can embody post-growth living. Right. And that is that cultural shift that I think you're really speaking to. That's something we can all practice individually, but also collectively.
And I think I personally, it's hard, right? I come from the high tech world, and we're right in the heart of AI and energy and data, but I do know that being at companies where they are standing behind their mission statements, not a plug for Cisco, but power and inclusive future for all. And we do have a good mission and social outlook, and we're trying to navigate that. I think it's, using your voice at your company and wherever you are is important. And there's, a lot to do there, and finding others like-minded at your companies to help raise your voice is something else we can do, because it is hard, like as Wei-Tai said, with anybody that reports to a board and has shareholders. If you come in with that, unless you're interface carpeting, right, where they kind of set out the mission for their story and changing the way they worked. So I think it's up to us to help inspire organizations to make change too. So. Great. Anybody else have any questions or comments for the team? I think if you look in the chat, there's some great links to the books. Keith Nicholas said another book, Slow Down, the Degrowth Manifesto is another one. And then Siri did put the link in from the recommendation for Less is More by Jason Hickel. That's in there as well. Yeah, Jane.
One thought just on that, and I think Della, you maybe mentioned this at the beginning of the call, but can you update us on how you are working with like a business school or economics department curriculums? That seems like such a core space where we need to influence the thinking and the curricula, and kind of frameworks are from, have been developed over the last 40 years in this sort of shareholder primacy soup, right? With that as the optimized outcome. And so, what opportunities, what inroads is your group seeing to actually be reframing some of those institutional structures that then kind of perpetuate, what Pam described, right? Of having to report to the board and quarterly earnings and all of that.
Yeah. Well, Franziska has been doing a lot of great work on this. I definitely want to turn to you, Franziska, for the specifics. But yeah, I would say you're absolutely right, Jane, that getting into economics classrooms and economics departments, as well as business schools and business departments is a very crucial leverage point for Doughnut Economics. In the economics department realm, what I would say is Kate Raworth has those 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. And they're in the book, and there's also a set of videos, but they really are that unlearning, right? So they are the things that are taught in mainstream economics that then we can unlearn and learn alternatives. Things like we as humans are Homo economicus, rational, self-interested beings, to we as humans have the capacity to be kind, compassionate, and altruistic. And like, what does that shift? Talk about cultural shift, right? What does that lead to? Or this piece around growth as well that we talked about. So there are these core ways that we can unlearn mainstream economic thinking and really understand economics and what is economics differently. I'll just kind of point to something here that Kate Raworth reminds us that the root of economics, oikos nomos, right, the etymology, comes from Greek, management of our home. And so at first it was really the domestic home and then the nation state home. And really what Kate Raworth and Doughnut Economics and likely folks involved in the climate space are really saying is now 21st century economics is about managing our planetary homes. We really must think globally. And so we have to think about it at that level. And also who is responsible for managing our homes? Right? All of us are responsible for this, not just economists. So that's something I would say about, how do we shift within the economic space? And then in the business schools, as Franziska has put in the chat, there is a toolkit, a whole presentation, and also a framework for how businesses can weave in Doughnut Economics thinking into their businesses. So a series of kind of layers of business design that you can consider. But one thing that I'll say personally I've been really inspired by is to think about how profit, the motive, and the mechanism can really be part of this growth imperative, right? The addiction to profit, and that profit must grow, and that a company must be profitable, and that is the good thing. And I'm really inspired by the model that what if profit was redirected to social and environmental good? So this idea of the not-for-profit business, where you have a nonprofit that has sale of goods and services, but that sale of goods and services is redirected towards mission-driven work. And there's several examples of this. Patagonia is one, right? That Patagonia just made Earth its only shareholder, right? So that's one example. But yeah, there's a whole framework and whole layers of ways that you can weave in Doughnut Economics into businesses and enterprise. But Franziska, how have you been doing this work? Because I know you've been actually at some business schools.
Yeah, that's right. We've been bringing donut thinking and just any kind of heterodox economics to a couple of places, including the Haas School of Business here at Cal Berkeley, the Goldman School for Public Policy, also here at Cal Berkeley. We've been virtually on the Lift Economy MBA program, and also at the Vermont Middlebury School for a regenerative economics class. And Della, which ones am I forgetting? There must have been more, but those were the ones I was
Santa Cruz and Stanford. Yeah, we've been in contact with as well.
Yeah, and a couple more in the works. Yeah.
And
the idea is to bring it, actually, sorry, just a footnote. The idea is to bring it also really into the core classes that everybody has to take there, and not just being an elective later or only for people who are kind of student self-organizing a speaker series or something. Mm-hmm. And some of them actually recommended to even do it earlier, maybe in high schools. If they do anything of economics basic classes there, it should also be there. So I put into the chat a link to the tools that DL, the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, offers. So if any of you are in the educational space or interested in that, have a look there and see if any of that is useful. There's a real richness and depth there now of tools for any level.
Great. Jane, did you have another comment or no?
No, I think that was really helpful. And I think Della, just, building on, what you said about corporations and incorporation and all of that, there's just a lot of really interesting work happening right now around corporate governance and just really attempting to kind of innovate those forms and even kind of return them to where we were, because when corporations were first authorized to exist, they weren't always allowed to exist. And when they were first given charter to exist, it was to provide a public good that an individual was not able to provide. And in exchange, the state gave them certain rights and protections to assemble as a group of people as a corporation. And I think the very first corporation was like a public light company or so something, right? So initially corporations were chartered to provide a public good that neither government nor an individual could provide, but to fill that gap. And it's just so interesting how far we've traveled in the last 40 years in terms of the norms around what we kind of have now given corporations social license to do, right? And so I often remind myself that that wasn't always the case, and that was a concerted effort over the last 40 years to actually change the Delaware case law to support, shareholder optimization, and that's actually something that we can push back on, right? And I think Patagonia is a great example. There are others out there too. Nestle, I think, incorporated a social purpose, as does Danone in their articles of incorporation. So I think looking to those examples is also really, really powerful.
Great. Thank you, Jane. I think, I have one question, because I think being at a company that's we're trying to hold on to what our beliefs are, and yet we're pulling back on using the term regenerative. And I was just trying to look that up, right? So I talked with some of our people that work in our chief sustainability office, and the term clean energy is being more identified than regenerative. And I'm wondering if you guys have found anything in some of the discussions you've had with people about why is that becoming not a term we want to use in this current climate.
Particularly regenerative has not really popped up as a green flag, to put it that way. But I think in general, there is more green hushing coming up in a lot of places that are trying to steer a politically viable course, even if you're not totally kowtowing to the powers that be. But on the other side, there has to be, I think just the fact that you're still calling it a chief sustainability office speaks to at least some backbone there. And I hope that, especially given that we in California are a little bit shielded and protected, even though it takes more and more effort to keep up those protections every day, that still gives us an advantage for trying to do that work. And again, if the big picture gives us currently too much pushback, a lot of people find that they want to redirect their efforts at more local level. For us at CalDEC ourselves, maybe we're just hopeless idealists, but we're also trying to be pragmatic and rolling up our sleeves and helping local places implement that. We're also talking about partnerships with more bioregional approaches, because let's face it, state borders are kind of an artificial thing. And it's, for example, more important to see kind of where watersheds are, or where, for example, the Salmon Nation is extending and so forth. So we're looking also to indigenous wisdom to bring that in. But again, Pam, I'm digressing from your corporate question there.
That's fine.
It's good to hear from the field. I think as long as we have the discussions out there as to what's on top of people's minds, what are they struggling with, trying to bring different thinking into organizations. Unfortunately, the current climate doesn't make it easier, but we hopefully can still stand strong and be together and figure out ways to at least have the effects that we want, even if we have to put a slightly different label on them.
And I like what you said about going local. The Climate Rally Project is holding federal defense calls every other week. I wasn't able to attend on Tuesday, but they really are trying to encourage that local action, right? What steps can we take? They've got some folks on the ground in DC and saying what's going on, and then how we can take it back, right? Like you mentioned, our policy action teams, and we're fortunate. We go across 8 counties, and we have 6 policy action teams that are taking local action, and they can decide what they want to do. But and the other thing I did want to say to both of you is we do have a California Coalition call for climate reality, and that stems all the way from San Diego, where Joe is from, and all the way up to the north. And there's a call coming up, but I think what you guys are doing, it'd be great to have you guys have a session on that, so I can speak with Andy Hottel. I don't know if you met him, Franziska, at our event, but he was there. He's the West Regional lead for Climate Reality, and is based down in the San Diego area, Los Angeles area. So that would be kind of some good opportunities. So I did want to. So Keith talks about. I don't know, Keith, if you want to pose a question. I know you say not up to speed on evolving California state K-12 standards, but local school districts in the Bay Area and possibly elsewhere are developing environmental studies frameworks for high school or for across K-12. So a timely opportunity. So are you thinking that that's a possibility to incorporate this learning into school curriculum? Keith, I don't know if you're still on, but
yes. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I just happen to know that like our local school district in Berkeley, I live in Berkeley, has had committees working on developing the curriculum kind of from the ground up, focused on environmental studies across the whole K-12 range. And I'm not sure how much that's guided. I'm just not staying up to speed on the state level curriculum standards and policies right now. I don't know if that's guided by state new state standards. I'd have to check, but I'm just sure that I'm guessing that that's going to be possibly going on statewide, or certainly in other school districts too. There's going to be an interest. So as I was watching the presentation, I was just thinking how well this could fit into those discussions and really provide a support, a tool, and a resource that's pretty sophisticated, but can also be presented in more simple terms also, and be used in lots of different ways to help fill in these curriculum that they're trying to create.
Great.
It's wonderful to hear if that there's interest in bringing that into curriculum and that they're still developing it. On some other levels, we've also been hearing that the curriculum is already set and so full already, they don't have additional instructional minutes to even talk about heterodox approaches or whatever it is. In schools, we would definitely not use those words. We would probably just take kids at whatever age and interest level they are, and maybe hopefully also try to connect it with other things that they're learning at the same time. But again, I can point you to the Doughnut Economics Action Lab tools for schools, and maybe there's something that can be done to bring it into those schools. And in Berkeley particularly, I know that they have this sustainability advisor person, young woman, name escapes me for a second, but you're probably aware of that, and maybe through combining the efforts along with that. Hello?
Great. Anything else, or we'll go to Joe? He's got his hand raised. Great, Joe.
Yeah, thanks. This conversation has obviously been mostly about economics and the inners of the donut, if you will, but I think we also don't pay enough attention, even those of us involved in climate, to the systems dynamics view implications of the planetary boundaries. And, the boundaries need a lot more awareness. I mean, I talk to people in the climate space where I mostly spend my time. Some of them have never heard of the boundaries or, can't identify them and don't understand. So, let's not underplay the importance of the boundaries on global, regional, and local levels again.
Great. Good thought. Good thought. And Jane commented to Keith on what's going on right now. And Jane, to me, I think one thing I'd just like to encourage people to do is that's why we're on these calls, to meet each other and to get some things going, right? I mean, anybody can have an idea, and then you got to meet people to be able to incubate that idea and turn it into something that can be actionable. So that's something that I think that's great about attending meetings like this, and hopefully you guys can find a way to connect offline if you're of interest to collaborate together on anything. Great. Anybody else have any questions? Well, I'd like to thank our speakers. Jane just put her email. If you want to put your email in here, and you can get in touch with folks. I want to thank our speakers, Della and Franziska. This was a very interesting discussion. I know our website is in the chat as well, Climate Reality Bay Area. And please feel free to join our chapter and get involved. You can do anything, right? We had somebody launch a podcast. Keith is on. He's part of our writers team. So we have Siri on, who's a part of our climate justice team. And it's a great organization and a way to get involved locally and take action and make a difference in this world. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And this will be posted on YouTube, so feel free to pass it on to friends as well to learn a little bit more. Thank you very much. Very educational.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, feel free to download the chat. There was a lot of great resources there. And yeah, for us, we're just really grateful to be in community with all of you. Like we said, we really feel a partnership and a similar aspiration. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for this time this evening. It's been really good to be with you all.
Thank you so much. Ditto.
Thank you. And thank you to the events team for hosting.